Hello and welcome. It's so lovely to see some faces I know and some people I don't yet know. And I'm very, very glad that you're here. My name is Sherry Coman, and I am a deacon in the Eastern Synod of the ELCIC. I'm also associate professional faculty at Martin Luther University College, or Luther as we call it. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the Center for Spirituality and Media, based at Luther and supported by both Luther and the Eastern Synod. The Center for Spirituality and Media launched last May, and its mission is to help deepen our awareness of how media can be used to enrich both our personal spirituality and our work together as the community of the church, and to encourage us to think more deeply about our uses of media. Center events will take a variety of forms. Sometimes they will be programmed with presentations and breakout groups. And sometimes, like tonight, it will be just a simple conversation over the course of an hour with an opportunity at the end for you to ask questions. Before I continue into this evening's program, I would like to acknowledge that all of tonight's participants, including myself, reside on the traditional land of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral peoples, on land that was promised to the Haudenosaunee by the Haldimand Proclamation of 1784, and which includes 6 miles on either side of the Grand River from its headwaters to Lake Erie. As we know, only 46,500 acres of that land remains as Indigenous land at the 6 nations of the Grand River. Just today, November 9th, at 6 Nations, work officially began to search for missing children in unmarked graves associated with the Mohawk Institute Residential School, the oldest and longest running residential school in Canada. So today and every day, we at Luther commit ourselves to the ongoing work of reconciliation and hold this kind of process in prayer. I invite you to acknowledge in the chat the lands that you are joining us from. Tonight, I am pleased to be welcoming Nathan Manti and Rebekah Ludov to talk about what it's been like to offer family ministry in an online setting during the pandemic. Nathan and Rebekah live in Waterloo and attend Trillium Lutheran Church. They have 2 children, Sonia, age 7, and Oscar, age 4. Nathan has worked in youth and family ministry for both the Anglican and Lutheran churches and has served in Oregon, British Columbia, and Ontario. He has directed summer camps, worked with puppet and clown ministry, as well as engaged in more serious activities such as teaching confirmation class. He is currently the youth and family coordinator at Trillium. Nathan also teaches outdoor education for the Waterloo Region District School Board. And if you're on Twitter, I totally recommend you follow him, Nature Nate, because it's a very fun feed and you learn a lot on his feed. Rebekah Ludov was a volunteer coordinator of family programs at Trillium before the beginning of the pandemic. She has directed summer camps and participated in synodical worship teams. At church, she enjoys planning liturgies that engage congregation members of all ages. And at home, she experiments with family rituals that follow the liturgical year and seasons of creation. I'm hoping we'll hear some about that later. Outside of church life, Rebekah recently finished her PhD in literature, so congratulations. And welcome, Rebekah and Nathan. It's so great to have you here tonight.
Thank you, Sherry.
We're glad to be here.
So I'm just going to say to those who are with us that during this conversation, please feel free to write any questions you have in the chat, and later we will take some time to answer them. All right, well, both of you are based at Trillium, as we've said, and where you also create family ministry. And so Nathan, why don't you just tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing at Trillium?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sherry. So it certainly has been a big learning journey, I think, for everybody in ministry with the COVID-19 pandemic. But it's been a fantastic opportunity to use these technological tools that we have. So now that we are able to gather in person sometimes, with adults being vaccinated, we are doing some of our family ministry programs in person and some online. But previously, during some of the earlier waves of the pandemic, we were limiting our family ministry to online programs. And so last year that consisted of a youth night for high school age youth. We had a games night for middle school age. Often we would play a game that works well over the internet or on a mobile device like Among Us, and we would have a Zoom video chat on or audio on simultaneously so we could chat. And then we also had a Sunday morning kids church program, and we continue to do a Sunday morning kids church program. This year we have started gathering on Wednesday evenings for pizza and family programs for kids and confirmation class, youth group, followed by a Taizé service.
Wow.
Now, this year has been really interesting because when we tried out our Sunday morning in-person family program, we had some enthusiasm the first week, and then that kind of dropped off. And I think that it's a lot for parents to get themselves dressed, get their kids out the door, get everybody fed breakfast, and come to an in-person program, especially now that the weather is not as nice. It's harder to gather outdoors. And with kids not being vaccinated, we were finding that we had limited success with participation in that program. So we switched back to online kids church, and last week was the first week that we went back to online kids church, and it was really a great, successful program. We had a lot of kids come, and everybody seemed very comfortable to share openly about their week and about our Bible story for the week.
Okay, so that's actually such a testament to the work you all were doing over the past year. That there was an interest, that something about it was working well. It can't be just convenience, something about it was working very well in the online setting. So let's go back to the beginning of the pandemic, and you're sort of, we're all of us were caught off guard, and so as it starts to unfold, what were the challenges that emerged for you in family ministry work? And this is to either of you. What were the first responses that you had about how you were going to make this work?
Maybe I could start, because at that point so just a bit of background. Trillium, if you don't know, is an amalgamation of 3 churches. And shortly before the pandemic started, we had just gotten our interim pastor, and our pastor, Alina Salonen and Ed Bastian, our pastoral team, were hired partway through the pandemic. So we were in a major transition community forming phase. And at that point, I was doing volunteer stuff to coordinate family programming. And I was so excited about some of the stuff we'd been able to do, because we've got families from 3 congregations, actually mostly just from 2. The one congregation didn't have many families, but not a whole bunch, just like a small group of committed families who are showing up. So it's like, okay, we need to show that we can do this, that we can be together and be community. And so much of that had involved all the things you can't do with COVID, right? It had meant meeting in the small chapel in a circle, letting kids run around, having families bake communion bread, having kids serve communion, singing together, singing songs kids can do. It meant doing all the hands-on, in-your-face stuff that was just shut down. And we're a very outdoorsy group of people. So there was the possibility of, could we do stuff outside? But in the beginning, even that, right, we weren't supposed to be gathering. And then once we could, it was complicated. We're a church organization. So then we'd have to officially book park space. We can't just go gather in the park. So there was really, at least for me, because part of what I want to share with my kids, and part of what I think kids actually offer us, is that they aren't going to pay attention if you're not authentically present like as leaders and as parents, like they know if you're not really there and they won't be there. And they want to be embodied in the present moment and connected to what's going on around them, which I actually think are their gifts. And they challenge us to look at in church and go, am I actually present? That doesn't need to be dancing around crazy and hyper, but it does need to be present, because I think we can expect kids to be present and quiet. They can do that, but they do it much easier if adults are doing it as well and are actually present. So it was a challenge to think about how are we going to do this, because the option was to do online church, which wasn't offering communion at that point. So there's a whole engaged thing gone. Singing was often hymns with words on the screen that at least my kids can't read yet, right? And so it was, okay, am I going to make my kids sit on the couch and sit through church? Then church will be, Nathan actually took a very funny time lapse video one day, which of him standing, watching church on the computer, and the kids had built a train track around the computer with their Thomas the Tank Engine trains. And so he's fixing things, and it's like, this isn't really a worshipful experience for our family, right? So I found that very discouraging, because a lot of things I've been excited about had stopped. And then part of it as well was some of the limitations put on that, right? So for me, not being able to do communion, that was very difficult. If you think about it now, and my congregation does do communion, if we weren't doing online communion, and if I didn't have a father who was a pastor, so we did communion through it all together. And if I wasn't just kind of okay with doing communion on my own, even if we don't have a pastor, even though I'd rather do it with a pastor, my 4-year-old probably would never have had communion that he remembers, right? And so some of that attitude that was circling around at the beginning of the pandemic that seemed to be limiting even just how we could think creatively about doing, not sitting on the couch and watching worship, but like doing worship and being engaged, for me really felt like it was limiting the things that I thought kids can offer and that we learned from doing with kids. So those are the challenges I felt. And then just the difference between maybe kids would need to do something separate. And I know I will end on this positive note before passing that back from Nathan. When we found out that we had Ed and Alina as our pastors, and the first thing I did was I knew Pastor Alina from ages ago, but I didn't really know her, Googled them and saw that they were doing these puppet videos for their church in Ottawa. I just had this moment of, somebody is doing something that will engage the kids. And that was so meaningful for me that was a priority. It was straight to, well, how are kids going to have something? And that was such an opening and a gift, I think, for then what Nathan moved forward with.
That's fabulous. Thank you for that, Rebekah. Nathan, do you want to add anything?
Yeah.
Before we go on to how you handled it?
Well, yeah, I would say I was going to get into what we did.
Sure, go ahead.
So, and I maybe to segue from the conversation around that puppet ministry, Ed and Alina had been doing that at their previous congregation, and we're enthusiastic to continue that, in worship, even in an online space. But that often took the form of a recording that was played in worship. Between a conversation between the pastor and a puppet, and the puppet kind of represents a childish character who maybe doesn't quite understand the Bible story, or is trying to relate to some of the more difficult parts of it, and the pastor can answer questions that the puppet has that kids might also be asking, and it's an opportunity to hear that Bible story maybe in kid language. So we wanted to bring that into our online kids church program. And I have to say, one of the unexpected joys that came out of the online space was that the kids in the Sunday school or kids church program really got to develop a personal relationship with our pastors. And that that typically doesn't happen in Sunday school. Pastors have a lot to do on Sunday morning, and whether you do Sunday school before or after church, typically they have other demands on their time. So we found that, both for our kids, but for all the kids who are attending, all the children in the kids church program, that they really felt comfortable with the pastors to tease them, to ask questions, to be vulnerable. And we really valued that, because I'm not sure that we would have been able to create that in a different space if we were in person. It would have required us getting the pastors and kids together on a weeknight, which can be more of a challenge for families. But having the opportunity to do a puppet show in kids church actually worked out really well. I actually find the four walls of the Zoom screen to be a very effective puppet theater, because I can just walk off the screen.
Right.
Right, and then it
You can do anything
to create an illusion, and so the kids really like that, and the other thing is, if we're working from a script, the pastor and the puppeteer can read off a script in their own space. They don't have to try to practice or memorize. So if you're doing an in-person puppet show, it can be harder for a pastor or a host to really create that immersion experience or sense of, it's a real conversation happening freely, because they're probably going to have a piece of paper in front of them that they're reading off of. So it really created this awesome opportunity, and something I definitely suggest if you've never operated a puppet, in front of kids. It's a lot of fun, and it feels a little nerve-wracking the first time you do it, but you'll never go back.
It is such a natural way to be creative on media. And as you say, I loved what you just said about the four walls of the Zoom screen, that the opportunity to play with the actual theatrical frame of Zoom and to absorb it into this idea of the puppet show, or you could do anything like that. Sounds very exciting. Can you just take us through what kids church is? How does it work?
Absolutely, yeah. So I decided to call it kids church instead of Sunday school, because I wanted everybody participating to get the sense that this was a worshipful experience, and that we were gathering together not just to learn about faith, but to practice faith and to practice worship together. So we start with introductions, especially toward the beginning, or if we ever have new folks coming. We share our name, our age, our pronouns, and we share a high and a low from the week. And we make sure that every week we start off by sharing a high or a positive highlight, and a low point from the week. And because this is so open-ended, it's really freeing for kids of all ages to choose what they share. So it can be a really good way to get people talking, especially if you're concerned that you might have participants kind of feeling maybe shut down or not comfortable being vulnerable or even talking. To start with an activity where everybody has the chance to use the microphone. They're going to have their own time and space protected, and they can share whatever they want to about their week. And then we would have a question that's related to the Bible story in some way. And sometimes it's a serious question. Sometimes it's just a fun story. Recently, our question was, when was a time when you didn't feel good enough? And we had some really fantastic responses from kids. I should mention, by the way, that all of the outline that I'm describing, the Kids Church outline, is available as a resource if you want to refer to it. It's available on the Center for Spirituality and Media website.
It is indeed, and in fact, Rebekah and Nathan very generously put together a little resource that we can send you away with for doing online church with families and with children. And I think it is called I had it up just a minute ago here, Kids Church at Trillium. And I think what it does is it presents a model or a unit of a full experience of Kids Church one Sunday. And it can be used, I think, I'm assuming, and
Yes.
we are
Yep.
offering it to you. It was developed by Nathan with the pastors that he's mentioned, Pastor Alina and Pastor Ed at Trillium. So we invite you to make use of that and to check it out. And I'm really grateful to you all for making that available to us this evening. And some of what you were just talking about is on the document. So that idea of, saying their name, age, and pronouns, and the highs and the lows, which I think is really great, and then relating it somehow to the whatever the lection is for that particular day that you're going to be working with. So as people perhaps check that out, I want to just ask you both, so what were the challenges that you encountered? What was hard? Because it sounds like you've been amazingly creative. So what was really, really challenging amidst all that?
I would like to say, I saw someone had a question about, is the puppet dialogue live? And if I could just respond to that briefly.
Great.
Because I think one of the challenges I mentioned earlier about passive, like the passive nature of, it doesn't have to be, but the way online worship can be passive and how that can be hard for children, is that the puppet dialogue is live. So that's a solution to it in some ways. So kids, like my 4-year-old, is always interrupting the puppet show with a question, either for the puppet, which might be about the kind of animal the puppet is, or about the Bible story or what they're talking about. And I actually think that's part of one of the gifts, and actually one of the solutions is that it is interactive, right? In a way that mimics what we do in real when we can be in person, rather than something we watch.
I think that's a really important thing you're saying, especially, sorry, I think I just cut you off. I apologize. That in terms of keeping that line, which is something I care a lot about, that line between watching and participating, which is, I think, going to be the thing we all wrestle with going forward in our hybrid versions of church. How do we, and I think you're right, that when stuff is live, where children are concerned, it's much more likely that you can have these live and active responses from them. So I think that's really cool.
Absolutely. And I think that connects really well to like a challenge, which was at the beginning of the pandemic, we felt like there wasn't much for our young children that would engage them, because there was not back and forth. What was available was watching something passively. And so, out of that experience as parents, like, we were really motivated to come up with some opportunities that were really participatory, and to center that experience of the child in the worship or faith conversation that's going on.
I do think one of the challenges, and again, so Nathan, I had nothing to do with planning Kids Church. I would be a parent when that is going on and got to enjoy it. Certainly a challenge is, and I think as a parent, you just kind of have to let go of this, because they are listening, even if they seem like they aren't, is the wandering away and the coming back. Like, that does naturally happen, especially with our younger one. One of the challenges, and one of the things I feel quite sad about, is the way the pandemic, by the necessity of meeting kids' needs, has really separated us from the larger congregation. So I feel quite strongly that one of the things, when I look back on my childhood, that a church environment offered was the intergenerational context, was being with everyone from the great grandma to the new baby. And we don't do that in our society. We do that at church, but it's been hard to do that over the pandemic, partly, I think, because of the difference between the needs of kids when we're online and the hesitancy of adults to embrace that, in particular, if it's an older generation who's just getting used to the technology to begin with, right? And I think that has led to some challenges. Like, when I think about this as a parent, like, I know sometimes Nathan's come back to me, again, this is from me from a parent perspective, not from leading, with, okay, well, we'll videotape the kids singing the song at the end and we'll share it. Or questions about how much should we videotape and share with the congregation. And I feel quite uncomfortable with that as a parent. Like for me, this is the kids' worship time. And I want the larger congregation to know kids are doing things and they're still here. They're still here. Our small group is still here. But I want the kids to feel like it is their safe worship time, and it's not going to be shown. And even those like laughed at, it's so cute giggles can sometimes interfere with a kid's sense of, okay, like they don't get that was being cute. That was them legitimately sharing their understanding of a Bible story, what the puppet was doing. So I think that's one of those fine lines of when is it a performance? Mm-hmm. Like I don't like when my kids' when their worship or their spiritual reflections are a performance. I'd prefer them to be seen as equal members of the community. That being said, absolutely the kids singing a song has been videotaped and shown at worship, and that's okay, because our kids love to sing and dance around. But I think that's a challenge and I think it's something I've been thinking about that moving forward. Like we have the capacity now to zoom in and out and to see everything. And I've been thinking about how will it feel if we haven't done this yet, but if the puppet show's happening live in church and like the video zooming in on the kids and everyone else can see the kids' faces on the screen, like that might be lovely for people in the congregation, but I don't want my kids to be self-conscious that their interaction is being watched. So yeah, that's a challenge I think we still face.
This is really important stuff. In general, and it has to do with the authenticity of the way in which we are presenting what we do in worship to others using media, right? So it can be authentic in the sense that we are recording live and it's being experienced live in a natural kind of way, but it also can lose some of its authenticity because the context that the children were used to is no longer the context that it's being engaged within. So it's something that we're all going to be reflecting on and trying to figure out going forward. But I'm so glad you mentioned that challenge of the performative aspect. We had it anyway in children's time. We do have it, and sometimes it works really well and children are comfortable and adults are comfortable, and sometimes it has that performative edge to it that is not necessarily comfortable. So
one of the opportunities to kind of bridge that challenge has been often our kids' church experience will include a craft or activity, something creative where the kids are drawing or folding paper, and they often feel really proud of their artwork. And so I'll invite them, and if there's parents in the room who are listening, I'll invite them, if the kid wants to share, to take a picture and send it to me right away, right? Because parents don't have time to remember, I'll get back to that, right? And then, with the understanding, and I'm really clear about this, we want to be able to share this artwork with the larger congregation in worship and in our newsletter. And that can feel like a win-win, because often the kids, they will want to be with their picture. They want to have their drawing right up next to their face with their smiling face to show what I did. And I think that can be really positive, both for the larger congregation and for the kids.
Cool. And I know that you've been especially creative. Both of you, but Nathan, I know that you have been creating as part of, I think, of all the different pieces of the work that you do, these wonderful videos that kind of immerse us in activities. I don't know if we've dropped that link in yet, but on the Trillium website, you can find videos of Nathan working with his own children, but also with others, just engaging in everyday kind of fun activities like working with the bees. Just one of my favorite videos.
Yeah, absolutely. And we put together that video as part of the Bridges VBS. You can find it. I think that there will be a link available to the Trillium YouTube page where there are a number of these videos. Yeah. So this was just a great opportunity for me to create some videos for families to do at home. So like Oscar helped me make a snack and we went through a recipe and we recorded it, and it was, we did a few takes, but it wasn't super polished or anything. And We are fortunate to have an audiovisual person on staff who could kind of take the time to edit it together. But yeah, it was a lot of fun for me to put that together, and it was great to get the response from families that they enjoyed, watching it or participating in the activities that we were kind of guided through in the video. And of course, the larger congregation enjoyed seeing the kids in the video, participating in those activities as well.
So that's not in a worship context. That's just simply, as you say, part of Vacation Bible School.
That's right.
Yeah.
Like you would on a camp day. So the one that I'm thinking of, the theme was Be Kind, and I have access to some beehives, and so I, took my mobile device and recorded myself looking at the bees and learning about the different cells in the honeycomb. Where's the honey? Where are the baby bees? And how do we get honey from the bees? And because that's a really cool hands-on camp type of thing, and we wouldn't probably take a VBS group necessarily to live beehives, but we can certainly do it with technology. And so it seemed like a great opportunity. That's
really cool. I'm just gonna shift now to Rebekah. You had said that that you enjoy putting together rituals for the seasons of the year, or the church seasons of the year, for the family at home.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share a bit more with us about that?
Sure. And I was thinking about it. It does tie into what has happened post pandemic as well, and to some of the media questions as well, or possibilities. So once I had kids, and thinking about I think it is such a question and a choice to raise your children attending church these days. It is a weird thing to do, in particular, like a mainstream church, right? Not a mega church or something. And so thinking about what are the things that most impacted me growing up, and did they actually happen at church, or did they actually happen at home? And I'm sure it was a mix of both. But I remember thinking about Advent, because Advent was the one time of year when we did light the Advent wreath and gather around. And I was really influenced by Christine Paetner's work, and she talks about the Celtic year in combination with the liturgical year, and wanting so much for my kids to experience our faith and tradition in reference to the material world and creation, and the liturgical year and the way it overlaps with the seasons where we live anyways, is such an opportunity for that. So yeah, it's been quite meaningful for me to think about through the year, what are we going to do at home and in the intimacy of our home. So our kids are seeing us practice, and we're practicing together, and telling the story throughout the year together. So things like a St. Francis, like on St. Francis Day, which also happens to be my daughter's birthday, so it's a bit of a special day. We read this book. This is Brother, Sun, and Sister Moon, which is the Canticle of the Creatures by St. Francis. And my parents happen to have a St. Francis statue, and we go and give him some bird seed and talk about who he was and bless our dog. So offer a blessing for our dog and the way what he brings to our life. And it is kind of our Thanksgiving ritual together, right? But All Saints, right now we have a table in our living room where we have pictures of our loved people in our lives who have died, who have gone before us, and taking time to light a candle and to tell our kids who all these people were. And I really appreciate that, because then we're talking about death, and we're doing it in a warm way, right? And then Advent, of course, we do. I'm really excited. We got this book for this year, Holy Troublemakers and Unconventional Saints. So one of the things we do through Advent is we do tell stories through the Bible of people who have gone through hard times, earth-shattering times, and found light and found hope. But this is a book of people from all different traditions who have challenged and changed things. So when we light our wreath, we'll tell a story of somebody in a challenging time finding hope. And some of those will be from the Bible, and some of them will be real examples. But it's also things like Nathan said, with highs and lows. It's been figuring out things like, well, I don't want to teach my kids, now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. Like, I don't need them lying there going, what does it mean if I should die before I wake? But so at bedtime, prayer is taking more a moment of, what am I grateful for today? What can I offer thanks for? And what is on my heart that I need to give over at the end of the day? So those kinds of rituals, some of them are on the church year and some of them on a daily basis. But we've also done some of those with our larger congregations. So some of the intergenerational worship, that's the stuff that I'm still involved in as a volunteer, is, so as a congregation gathering with our photos, we did that the other week. And people had a chance to share. Personally, this is someone who I'm thinking of today. And I appreciate that my kids get to see people of all ages naming. I think that's such a gift to our kids. But when that comes to media, and I do think that one of the things the pandemic demanded of us was things had to become more intimate and in the home. So like doing Ash Wednesday at home, we would normally have a family service earlier, but that we sent clay out to families and wrote a little liturgy. And then, families were invited to remember that we come from the earth, we'll go back from the earth, and we come from God, and we'll go back to God. God and all people are created equal, and doing that ritual together in your home. And so that didn't involve media, but then people did share photos of doing it. So there was a sense of, look at us all in our homes in this intimate space, and we're all doing it on the same night. And I do think there's a gift there of us being in our home doing these things. And I think it is different if you live alone. That's different than if you live with other people. So you'd be crossing yourself, you're still doing it, but I do think there's an added complexity there. Same with communion, offering communion at home, our kids having to participate, because this week, even Pastor Alina is offering it on I wish I'd taken a picture, is doing communion in our church, and Oscar's at home, and this is our 4-year-old, standing in the middle of the living room, holding the chalice above his head while Pastor Alina is saying the words. Like, that's so beautiful. He's participating, and it's in our home. And I think that will really form them. I don't know where they'll end up or what they'll do with what we teach them, but I think it is a good thing to do it together at home.
Certainly, and our kids have also taken ownership of serving communion, because that's what we've had to do for the past 18 months. And I think that it would be quite off-putting for them if post-pandemic they are not given opportunities to serve communion, at least in the context of a family or small gathering. One other in-home ritual that we supported through Trillium was on Maundy Thursday. For Holy Week, we sent out kits with little liturgies or objects to support family practices for the special days in Holy Week. And so we sent a bar of soap and a little liturgy for foot washing. And it was a lot of work to put that stuff together physically and then to deliver it to a lot of families. But it did create a sense of shared community, even though there was distance. And it was a great opportunity for me, because foot washing in the home was something that we've done for a long time, but I don't think most families probably do that. And most families maybe don't go to Maundy Thursday service, or if they hear that there's foot washing in Maundy Thursday service, like maybe they would be less likely to go if they haven't experienced how powerful it can be. So yeah, I just want to.
And I would just interject in there that the reason our family started doing foot washing in the home is those Holy Week services are often not at times when people with young kids can easily go. Or you get to Easter and your child is a wreck because they haven't gone to bed. So the pandemic really offered a chance to go, oh, well, no one's going, so we can all do it in our homes.
Hmm.
And that was meaningful for me because it's always a time when I feel a little left out. I want my children to walk through this week with our community, but our community has difficulty doing it at a time when children can attend. So it was
it's a
nice
missed opportunity, right? Because the experience of foot washing is so embodied and experiential that a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old can fully participate, and take away meaning from that. But it's at 7 o'clock, so that that's bedtime. So so it's unintentionally telling parents of young kids that your kids aren't really welcome at this service.
But Holy Week is so participatory to begin with, right? Like it is, I think, a missed opportunity when we don't host it in a way that kids can attend, because you don't need to understand the words. You just need to participate in the actions and watch, or participate in stripping the altar. Like that is very dramatic, even if you don't know what's going on in the story exactly, or what words have been said through the service. Something's communicated. So to have the opportunity to not be able to be together and how to figure out how to communicate those things in the home, I actually think was a gift. I hope we learn from it going forward.
Wow. It's so amazing that there's it brings up for me this whole conversation about intimacy and spirituality, which we may not have enough time tonight to really delve into, but which I think in terms of observing and looking to the future of ministry online, we have to be considering and thinking about, because we're so used to media being a place of programming where we are passive, where we receive as opposed to participate. And yet when we are actually engaged in what we are gathered in, we are in fact participating in our own way and experiencing something that is actually quite intimate. So this is like, theorists are working on this. But I wanted to just one last question, then we'll open it up to others. But I wanted to ask you, what are your hopes for the future of online family ministry? What are some of the things you hope will come forward? And again, either one of you to start.
I think I would say, so I'll just preface this with I'm not on Twitter. I have a Facebook account. I don't like it. I'm not a social media person. But when this happened, and I found myself reacting to online, I didn't want to do it. I would rather be outside. Thinking about, wait a minute, there are times when I have turned to online, practice Lectio Divina in a group online with strangers, right? Christine Paintner often hosts that because there wasn't anyone doing contemplative practice in my community. Or the Center for Action and Contemplation, that provides a lot of what I think about, and that's an online community. And so, okay, Rebekah, you need to get over this. You actually are engaged in it already. But when I think about my kids, I can't, maybe this me being too negative, I can't trust that there will be churches that they will attend. If my children continue to choose to be in a liturgical tradition, whether that's Lutheran or Anglican, I can't trust that there will be, in the direction we're headed, there'll be communities wherever they're going to live. So I hope there is something meaningful and intentional still online. And when I think something like kids' church, but for them in the future, right? And that we still have platforms where you are invited to share, to show up personally together, right? Show up in your personal space, be present where you are together with other people online. I hope that that's there for them if they're going to move somewhere where there isn't a church for them to attend and they want that. I think that will be necessary, and I hope that we continue so my kids have some idea of what that could look like. Yeah. So
you were saying, because you said a moment ago that you characterized that it was kind of weird to be attending, a mainstream church, say not a mega church.
Yeah.
Do you mean in terms of that this sort of the decline of church numbers and the possibility that churches will still be around when your children are grown, or what did you mean with that?
Yeah, I think what I mean is, and I would say this was my experience growing up too. My friends weren't religious of any sort. But then there was always a group of Christians at school who were part of evangelical congregation. And I think this bit about me, I'm not that, a little judgy, but it was, and I expect that to be my children's experience as well, right? What often gets labeled as progressive Christian people with kids, like, want to be friends, like just so that our kids have other people who are, it's wonderful to have friends of other traditions and of no tradition. That's fabulous, but it's nice to have somebody to talk to, right? Mm-hmm. So I think online will be necessary moving forward for them to have a sense of community.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Nathan.
My hopes for opportunities with media and going forward, I think certainly it's been a wonderful way to have a little snapshot window into faith practice in the home that families can share at their own comfort level, whether that's posting a picture online, on Twitter, sending it in to the office to be put in the newsletter. Certainly something that I will take with me going forward from a youth ministry perspective is creating opportunities and making sure to ask, to have an invitation, like, if you are doing anything for Holy Week at home, please take a picture and send it to me, and I'll make sure that we, I think, like, before the pandemic, I probably wouldn't have even considered that as an opportunity. And a highlight for me has been the way relationships have developed between the kids in the congregation and our pastors through the kids' church program. And so I will want to prioritize finding a way to, whether it's through using media like Zoom or creative scheduling, to make sure that we can harangue at least one of our pastors for kids' church or
you don't need to do that. Our pastors want to be with
they're very
kids.
committed.
We're lucky.
We're very lucky.
They sound wonderful. I am so grateful for this conversation, and we're kind of closing in on the end of the hour. I don't see any questions in the chat, and I'm not sure whether people are just being shy or you genuinely don't have any questions. But I do invite you to. We were saying to put them in the chat, but I think at this point, Mirko, who's behind scenes, I think we can maybe invite someone to put up their hand in the Zoom function, and perhaps we can invite you to then unmute briefly and say your question. Are there any questions at all? There might not be any. Oh, I see an actual hand raised from Vida. Okay, I'm not sure. Okay,
yes, can you hear me? Yeah, I'm Vida from I'm from Gloria Day, North Vancouver in British Columbia.
Welcome.
I went to Waterloo, so that's the connection. I'm so glad to be here. Did you experience, or your parents experience, like Zoom fatigue? Like at Gloria Day, when the pandemic hit in March of 2020, there was energy to, to finish up the year, like the Sunday school year. And so, yeah, everybody pivoted to go to Zoom. But when it came time, we don't have children's church over the summer. So, when the time came in September, there just wasn't energy from, the parents to do, children's online Zoom or Sunday school. I'm just wondering whether you had any of that in your context.
I think it's a little different in the sense that we didn't do anything. We said at the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't transition Sunday school to online. I think a lot, like parents, I think including ourselves, where the kids are supposed to be online all day, I'm not putting them online on Sunday. And I certainly felt that way when the kids' church model was introduced. But I think we noticed a lot of families doing online, and Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong here, because you'd be the more official person. kids doing online kids church, but adults not showing up for online Zoom church, right? And I think perhaps it's my kids are doing Zoom church, are doing kids church, and they're interacting, they're not just watching. And parents are having their coffee and getting a Sunday morning break, right? But people did show up pretty consistently for kids church, from what I could tell, Nathan. Isn't that true? But I do, and yeah. And I think, like, right now, I think families are just tired, whether it's online or, like, I mean, I feel like I need to say a million times to people, like, just remember, families, it's not over. Our kids are still home half the time because they have colds. Right? Families are still tired in general, whether it's for online or in person. Though I think when you said, Nathan, that the online's going better now, that was families saying, we're tired and our kids are back at school, so we're not going to church. You can do it online.
I think that, just to drive home that last point, that on a Sunday, for another adult to not only just entertain the kids in the home, but to really be talking with them and having a real authentic conversation and discussing faith and telling stories and doing puppet shows. Like, it was, we did see parents who were just kind of happy to, like, turn it on and go make coffee. And so a lot of my experience was, what's going to work for families? Everybody was stressed, has been stressed and continues to be stressed by the pandemic, but especially for families with unvaccinated children, there's a lot of hoops to jump through every day and in a week. So that was part of, the example I gave at the beginning. In person just wasn't working on Sunday mornings. And so we got that message, after a few weeks, and, tried to be nimble and switch back. And sure enough, it seems to be working.
So that's interesting. I see that Sonia, and I don't know if this Sonia is Sonia or Sonia, but I think it's Sonia. Sonia, you had your hand raised.
Yeah. Okay, I guess I'm on now.
Yes.
I love the idea about the kids' church and the puppets and the interaction. My question is, and maybe it's my generation showing, a lot of churches today will have their Zoom services and then they post them on Facebook. I'm always concerned about children's pictures and names being posted on Facebook. And I wondered if you do post your children's church or kids' church on Facebook, or if you do you remove the names even, or how does that work?
That's a great question. I think we make an effort not to post pictures of kids online at all unless we have explicit permission from parents. And if it's going on social media, we'll make sure that the names are removed. Okay. Typically, the way we get the pictures out to the congregation is through our email newsletter. But also it's been great to invite families to post, like parents who might have a Twitter account will post a picture. And so if they're posting it, they're obviously making that choice. And, sometimes they might choose to do a picture of the artwork instead of, the kid's face holding the artwork. And that's, gives them total control.
But kids' church is not recorded.
That's right.
Oh,
very good
okay,
point.
that's what I wondered.
Yeah,
kids' church is not recorded. And that's a good point, because if we were ever going to record a song to have in the larger worship, we would check at the beginning, like during introduction, say, so we're going to do a song at the end. We would love for anybody who's comfortable to participate. It's going to be recorded, but that'll be the last thing we do. So if you don't want to be on the Zoom screen, you can just hang up and I'll make sure to give you a warning, or you can just turn your camera off. It might display your name or your family's name. So whatever you're comfortable with. And it seemed like families really appreciated us giving them the fair warning. And for the most part, everybody seemed comfortable enough to stick around. But, it certainly felt good as a leader to give people a heads up and a warning anytime that was going to be the case.
Okay, that's helpful. It's just sometimes today I'm really surprised at the pictures that parents post of their kids online. And I don't think it's safe for the kids. That's my concern there.
Yeah, and I would say, I think, and this is where we are at as a family, and I think it seems like other families are this way too. Like we would post pictures of us doing whatever, like Trillium would post pictures of us doing whatever ritual at home, but we wouldn't put names on it, right?
No.
And it seems to be other families do similarly. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you very much.
It is it's a hard line to walk, because it's part of, being true and authentic to what you're doing, while also being safe. I sometimes fear there's a little too much fear of social media. At the same time, it's appropriate to be cautious in places where there's a much wider exposure. So that's another one of those things that has to be discerned, like whether or not to record and whether or not to share that recording. Rebekah and Nathan, I just want to say thank you to you both so much for this hour and for your wisdom and your knowledge and your gracious hospitality with what you know and with your experiences. I am so glad to have had this chance to spend this time with you. I'd also just like to say that, we at Luther, we're always inviting people to take a look at what we have to offer. So if you know anyone who's planning post-secondary education or further spiritual or theological training, invite them to take a look at luther.wlu.ca. Just again, thank you so much to our guests and to all of you for coming this evening. This will be available as the recording. And so I guess on behalf of the Center for Spirituality and Media, God's peace be with you and good night.